Hello, how are you guys doing? It is currently 1:05 a.m. on Sunday, and I am driving around vlogging. I was listening to my audiobook. I actually, before I left tonight, I got on Audible, and I bought 3 books. I can't remember which books I bought. Well, I bought the Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone because I've already read it once, and so I want to listen to it on Audible. I heard actually the Audible versions of the books are really good. So for the reread, I'm gonna listen to it on Audible. And then, and I'm probably, because I'm almost done with my next book, I'm probably gonna do that between now and when we leave for Connecticut next weekend. So that I can, because then when we go to Connecticut, I want to listen to my next Audible book, because I'm doing one Audible book for Booktubeathon, which starts a week from tonight. So if you want to do Booktubeathon, it's an annual readathon. It's really fun. I have videos on my channel about it, and then you can also just go to Booktubeathon on YouTube, and then all of the reading challenges and everything that you need to know is over there. You don't have to have a channel or anything to do it. Anybody can participate. So anyway, and people keep on asking me, they're like, well, do you have to have Twitter to do it? Because I don't have Twitter. You don't have to have Twitter to do it. I mean, it is more fun because there's like reading sprints and stuff, but I don't know. I only really did reading sprints last year, like one night, so it's not like you're going to miss a whole lot anyway. I still did Booktubeathon, you know what I mean? But the reading challenges are fun, and then you know what you're doing, and it's just kind of like see how much you can read in 1 week. That's really what it's about, is to see how much you can read in 1 week. Read as much as you possibly can in 1 week. So there's like 7 challenges. So ideally, if you completed all challenges, which Ariel Bassett, who puts it on, she said like she's never read all 7, never finished the challenges and read all 7 books. A lot of people pick really short books. I don't typically do that. Anyway, so I bought that, and then I bought another book called, it was on sale, Shark something. I don't know what it was about. This kid that was in a car accident, and then he's like paralyzed from the waist down, and then he uses this shark DNA that they've been testing for stem cell research, and he becomes like part shark or something. I don't know. It's Shark Week. Oh my god. So yeah, today was a good day. It was just very blah, very relaxed. We got up, we went to brunch. It was like dead when we got to the restaurant. It was like us and like 4 or 5 other people. It is like poured down rain all day long here today. And it's just real muggy in Indianapolis tonight. And I just got a Gatorade just went and got gas and Gatorade from the gas station. And, so we went to brunch, and then we came home. And it was our neighbor's birthday, and she was having this birthday party, and Alex went over there. He didn't stay for very long, and he came back. They were doing like an adult slip and slide and stuff. I was gonna go over there and just be like, hey, how are you, and say hi. I just didn't really feel like it. And her grandmother lives in her neighborhood, and her grandmother was like walking up and down. Like, they were so loud, which, I mean, I don't really care about that. But they had cars parked all over the street, and this is a retirement neighborhood, kind of. I mean, it's not called that, but it's just all older people. It's very quiet, and here she is out here with an adult slip and slide on the side of the house, and her grandma kept on walking by, and anyway. I have my Peterisms video and my BookTube video already filmed, so I posted those, uploaded my vlog, and then I did a Q&A today. The Q&A, I got so pissed because on my new camera, if I reach over, like, a lot of times this camera will let me reach over and then put my arm down, and then it like gives me a second before it starts, but the new camera won't do that. So I have to edit out the beginning and the ends of it. Well, I uploaded it completely and forgot. And to render it takes about 15 or 20 minutes, and then to upload it sometimes it takes 15 minutes, sometimes it takes like an hour. Well, I got it all the way uploaded, and then I realized while I was watching it back, I was like, oh my god, you like didn't cut out the beginning where I'm just like sitting there waiting. So I had to go back in, cut out that part, re-render it, re-upload it, and that took forever, and it just was a lot. So Alex was in bed, and he was like watching TV on the computer. Yeah, so that's about it. That was our day. I mean, it was just a completely lazy day. We didn't really do anything all day long, and it was actually really nice. I really like days like that. That's why Sundays are my favorite day. Kind of just refresh for the day ahead, you know. I was like, I got this question, and I thought about just talking about this on here tonight. So I got this question in my Q&A, and it said, would you talk about your opiate and alcohol withdrawal? You've never really talked about it before in a video. And I was like, you know what? Have I not talked about that? So I've told my addiction story, but I don't know like how much so I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to go in and kind of explain my addiction story at the beginning. And for those of you that have heard it before, I apologize. But the last day that I used was December 16th. So I'm just going to go in and tell the story. The last day that I used was December 16th of 1994. And I woke up. I think it was a Sunday. I'm almost positive it was a Sunday. I could be wrong though. The only reason I think that is because of the bar that I went to that night, which was this bar called the Vogue, which is actually still in Indianapolis. And they used to have this thing called Boing on Sunday nights, which was like this gay bar. It would like be a gay bar on Sunday nights, but it was like the only night of the week they did that. But it could have been something else. It could have been I was there for some other reason. I don't know. So it could have been a different night of the week. I have no recollection of what night of the week it was, but it was the 16th. I know that for a fact because my sobriety birthday is the 17th. That's my first day sober. So I got up that day, and well, the interesting question about this is I tested positive across the board, but I wasn't like a regular opiate user, so I don't remember what I would have used unless it was in something else, because when I took a drug screen in treatment, I literally tested positive across the board for everything. So I don't know like if something was cut, like, you know, with an opiate, or I don't know like why I tested positive, because I wasn't at that time actively taking opiates. So I don't know that I really went through opiate withdrawal, but I definitely went through alcohol withdrawal. With like cocaine, I was a really big cocaine addict at that time. Cocaine withdrawals are like in 10-day cycles, and you don't really go through really harsh withdrawals with cocaine. And like benzos and barbiturates, there's tough withdrawals, but it's not bad. The worst withdrawal that I went through was alcohol, and that was because at the point that I got sober, I was drinking between a fifth and a half, two fifths of Jack Daniels a day, usually like 2 or 3 malt liquors like Colt 45 or Oldie, or like a 6-pack of beer, 12-pack of beer. I was drinking a lot, you guys, like a lot every day, mostly by myself. And I really don't know, like looking back, I know I was buying every day. I was buying 2 fifths of Jack Daniels. I don't know how I came up with the money. I really don't, in retrospect. And some days I would wake up the next day and have, you know, let's say 3 or 4 glasses left, half a bottle. You know, sometimes I would wake up and have nothing and have to get to the liquor store quick. It just depended. So, and that doesn't count the drinks that I had when I went out to bars, because I was drinking really heavily in bars at that time too. I was going out probably 5-6 nights a week. I was smoking weed every day, a lot. I was smoking a lot of weed, and I was eating a lot of Vicodin. About 2 or 3 years before that, would have been when I was 20, because it was the year before I was 21. I got tonsillitis really bad, and it was right around Christmas time. So yeah, it would have been like exactly like 2 years before that. And my friend Jenny and I were going to London to visit her sister who was living there. Her sister was an artist in London. And so we went there and we flew there like on the 26th of December. And we were there for a week. I don't really remember a lot of the trip. I was so drunk, and they put me on like an antibiotic and high quantities of Vicodin because of the pain, and that if it continued when I got back, they were just going to take my tonsils out when I got back. But they weren't going to do emergency surgery because I didn't want to cancel this trip. And, which is funny to me in retrospect that they didn't. I don't know, like maybe it just wasn't that bad. So, yeah, so then I got really kind of like hooked on Vicodin, and it just wasn't good. I loved it. There was some uneasiness about it, that I just kind of was like floating on air, you know? And I liked pills because they were very clean. I did not, and I never snorted them or anything. Not that I'm opposed to that, or was opposed. I would have probably done anything. I mean, I snorted cocaine, so. But, you know, I didn't like marijuana. I still to this day, and then too, I couldn't stand the smell of it. I thought it was dirty. I thought it was gross. I hated touching it. Like, I just thought it was dirty. It was like, you know, I don't know. I never was a big, like, I smoked it a lot, but I just didn't love it. There was actually a guy that I would buy joints from, and he sold joints for $5, and they were like really tightly wound or like rolled. And I would, just buy joints from him because I didn't like to roll it myself. And I could roll joints really well, but I just didn't like it. It was so much, I liked it to be clean. I had a little box I kept them in, and when I wanted to smoke a joint, I loved to take a bath and smoke joints. That was the first thing I would do when I got up during the day was, you know, I used to, because I drank vodka too for a long time, and for some reason vodka wouldn't make me real sick like Jack Daniels did. So I always had a bottle of vodka around, and if I woke up and I was like really hungover or didn't feel well, I would take a glass of Pepto-Bismol and half a glass of vodka, and I would just chug it all the way down. And I called it, like, it was my trick. I thought it was so funny, and I called it the pink fag. I don't think that's cute today, but I did back then. So anyway, that would magically get me, I mean, it was like, you know, the hair of the dog that bit you, it magically got me over these hangovers. So, and then I was using the Vicodin, I was eating Vicodin, and all the time, and drinking was my constant. And then I started snorting cocaine about a year and a half before, maybe a year before. I started snorting it with a person that I was dating, so maybe a year and a half before. And then towards the end, like I'd say like the last 2 to 6 months, I smoked rock cocaine, but not very often. And I do have a memory of that night smoking crack, but so anyway, that was pretty much my use when I got sober. And what happened was I had been drinking all day that day, and typical of every day, that I would drink and smoke weed and eat Vicodin until like I was ready to go meet up with my friends to go out. And that would usually be like 9 or 10 o'clock at night when they were done with work, because they had real lives, and even though they partied, they had real lives and they had jobs and all that kind of stuff. And I was in school, that was my job, you know, but like I wasn't really in school at that point anymore because I had withdrawn from classes. I've told that whole story on here before, so I'm not going to get into that because I want to talk about the detox and stuff. But I had withdrawn from classes like before Thanksgiving, and had kept on going to classes for a while, or kept on going down to campus just to act like I was in class. I don't know, it's so delusional, you guys, when I look back on it. And one of my friends one day said, "Why are you down here?" And I said, "What do you mean? I'm here for class." And she's like, "You're not even in that class. The professor told us that you had withdrawn, or told me that you had withdrawn." So the professor had told my friend because the professor was worried about me. And I've told this story before about this professor that I met that wouldn't let me come into the class anymore. And I then later got to make amends to her. I saw her at a Starbucks. It was the most bizarre situations, but it was fantastic. And it was what they tell us, you know, they promise us that, you know. But anyway, I did a whole video about that on my Peterisms channel. So her name was Dr. Kubicek. I'll never forget. I mean, she was one of the only people that ever stood up and said, no, I'm not having it. She said, you can't come in, continue to come into class. And 10 years flash forward, I see her in a Starbucks, and she totally remembered me, and I got to make amends to her, and she just was awesome. She's like, I never get to see what happens to my students, and she was like, have a great life, and I'm so happy for you. I was 10 years sober at that time, and I told her I was doing that. I was working in a treatment facility. She goes, cool. It was a very cool moment. But anyway, so I went and I hung out with my friends that night. We went to this club, and then I was with one of my friends who was my very first boyfriend ever, Jack, and he has since passed away. And Jack and I kind of had this on and off again, like, Jack was he was an artist, and he was flaky and just could be very serious and intellectual and then very flaky the next moment. And I don't know, we had this kind of off and on thing. But anyway, so Jack was out, and he needed a ride home because he never drove, not in the, I don't know, 5 years that I knew Jack, and never had a car, didn't have a driver's license. So I said I would take him home, and he was like, well, you stay at my house, I'll drive, because he never, like, really was a heavy drinker. So he lived, like, on the opposite side of town of me, like in Fountain Square, and I was like, okay. So anyway, I have some memory of smoking crack in an alley with somebody, and I don't know who, like the alley that's right behind the Vogue, and it was like snowing, and I had watched Charlie Brown's Christmas that day, like it was like on repeat in my VCR, and I can remember, like, I just kept on, like, that was like the theme of the day, was Charlie Brown's Christmas, and I remember the snow was so pretty, and it was like I looked up at the lights, and it was like, this is so sick. I mean, that I'm like sitting there like high as a kite, right? And I'm looking at the snow, thinking to myself, oh my God, it's like Charlie Brown's Christmas, and trying to catch it on my tongue. Like, you know what I mean? Like at the beginning of it's crazy. So I went to Jack's afterwards. What was interesting was I met this guy. I do not remember meeting him. My friend introduced me to him, and he was a really good guy, and he was an attorney, and he was like 2 years older than me, and he looked like Ben Affleck. He still looks like Ben Affleck. And so he was like, he checked on me when I was in treatment. I met him that night, and my friend, this was like a friend of mine from high school that was like really like a good friend, and she's who picked me up from treatment after I got out, and she's like, so-and-so wants to know about you. And I was like, I don't even know this guy. And I met him, and I was like, oh my God, are we boyfriends? I'm like ready. And he was my first relationship when I got out of treatment. I mean, literally, I got out of treatment, and 3 days later, I got into a relationship. Don't do that, okay? Do not do that. They recommend that you take a year to yourself to, like, work on yourself. I should have taken a year to myself. But anyway, so, that was fun. It was a fun relationship. And, I remember that winter, he lived in Illinois, and I would drive over, and I would like visit him in Illinois, and then this is when I was going to meetings and stuff, and he had a fireplace, and we'd go out to dinner and come back to his apartment, or he'd come over here and visit me. Anyway, that's a story for another time. But God, life, I mean, it seems like so long ago, you know? It's weird being on YouTube because I'm still like protective of these people. Like, I don't like tell certain details about them because I wouldn't want anybody to figure out who they are, you know, in case they want to be private about their life. Isn't that strange? So anyway, so I was at Jack's apartment, and then the yellow light's been on for a while, so it's going to cut off at some point, but I'm just going to keep on talking until it does. And Jack and he sat up with me for a while, and he was like, no, don't leave, I'm taking your keys. He took my keys, and he took them into the bedroom with him, and then he like went to the bedroom and like went to sleep. Well, I sat there, and I'm like going through his tapes on the floor. This is so weird. I like took all these tapes of his, like I stole like the Sarah McLachlan tape, and like this Amy Mann tape. Oh, I don't even like her. There was like another tape in there that I took, tape cassette, you know. And then like I went into the bedroom. My nose was like really itching. I don't know why. Ugh. And then I went into the bedroom, and he was asleep, and he had put my keys like on the nightstand, and I took the keys, and I went out, and I filled my like, I had this leather like biker jacket, and I filled it up with like all the pockets inside, and it had these like deep inside pockets with beer, because he had beer in his fridge. And then I left, and right before I got to my car, it was like the street was completely silent. There was like nobody there. It was like probably 4 o'clock in the morning. I like slipped real hard and fell on my ass, And I remember I was just sitting there, and I like reached inside and took one of these beers out and opened it. And I'm literally like sitting on the ground in the middle of the street while it's snowing, thinking about that Charlie Brown Christmas. And I'm just like trying to catch snowflakes, you know, on my tongue. I had lost my mind, you guys. I was insane. I had lost my mind. And so then I started driving north to get to my house. I didn't even know really where I was, what part of town, that part of town that I was in. I didn't know it very well then. So I don't really know how I found my way back home, but I did. And oh my God, my nose, why is it itching so bad? So then I was driving home. I have a very spiritual experience with that, which I can talk about some other time, where I kept on looking over and talking to somebody that was in the passenger seat, but there was nobody there. And I do not remember touching the steering wheel while I was driving and having that conversation. Like, I remember like sitting here and the car was driving itself. I'm just telling you guys, this is what I remember. I know. Maybe it was hallucination. I don't know. But the next thing I know is I'm like going real fast, okay? And there's this area, you know, like on the north side of Indianapolis where there's like a White Castle, and there was a Perkins restaurant. It's not there anymore, and all this stuff. And I'm like going through the parking lot literally at like 60 miles an hour. And I kind of come out of it. I mean, I had like my foot floored on this, like the thing. And I sideswipe the Perkins restaurant into the kitchen, and I take off all these like bricks and stuff on the side of the restaurant, and then I like nosedive. There used to be a ditch there. There's not a ditch there anymore. They got rid of the ditch after me. And I like nosedived right down, and I was at the time I was driving a Pathfinder, a Nissan Pathfinder, and I just like drove the car right down into the ditch. So flash forward, my dad comes out, I end up in treatment, and when I went into treatment, I blew a point. It was like a 0.37 or a 0.47. They told me I should be dead, and I hadn't drank, you know, except for that beer. I hadn't drank in like 4 hours or 8 hours. I mean, it had been like a long time since I drank. And they told me that I should be dead from the alcohol level. And my stepmom's crying, and she's like, Peter, please go into treatment. And I don't even really remember anything from that night, honestly, like from that part of the night. Mostly what I remember is what they told me. And I do remember my stepmom looking at me bawling and being like, Peter, please go in. Please be willing to go in. You need to do this. She was really scared for me. And they did like a really quick like drug screen on me. And because, you know, you have to send in drug screens and whatever. But they tested like really quick on me. And like, I don't know how you do that, like a quick one. And it came back with everything across the board. Then they also took urine again, which that one, when they sent it away to the lab and it came back, also came back positive, everything across the board. So, I don't remember anything else from that night. All I remember is, I guess I signed paperwork and went inside, and they put my ass in detox. It just stopped. I knew I should bring my other camera tonight. My gut told me that, but I didn't. These people have like a Christmas wreath up on their door. That's so weird. Like a lit up Christmas wreath. Anyway, so I was admitted, and then I went into the detox unit. I don't remember anything about that. The next morning I woke up, and I remember I was like facing the door, and I like rolled over, and my roommate was this guy that was like 7 feet tall, and he was like snoring and moaning, and it like, it was like, and I was like, where am I? And they had taken my clothes because they were so like gross and dirty and stuff. And so like, I guess to, I don't know, wash or give to my dad or something. And so, but my dad had called because he had already talked to the doctor, because my dad was friends with the doctor that was the addictionologist. He's like good friends with him. And so he said, call all of Peter's friends, call his mother, call anybody that he'll contact to come and get him and tell him not to take his calls. I didn't know that. So anyway, I put on like these, you know, hospital pajamas and footies and this robe, and I walked out. I can't even begin to tell you how I felt. Okay, so I'm now like craving a drink like nobody's business. I'm like hungover beyond belief. I like feel like complete shit. And I at that point I had delirium tremens, which are DTs, so I shook like every morning when I woke up, like bad. And I mean, I couldn't even hold a cup of coffee. I was like, it would be like I don't even want to do that with the cap on, but it was like this, like, you can't see, but, so I walked out to go to the nurse, and I walked out, and I'm in, like, there's the nurse's station right there, and the nurse, my detox nurse, is my neighbor that I grew up with. My best friend growing up is her mom. I didn't even know she worked there, and I was so humiliated, and I just stood there, and I was like, hi. And she was like, hi. I read this, I think, on my Peterisms channel. I did a whole, because it's called, I wrote a vlog on my main, my blog back in the day called A Pretty Drinker or something like that. Because that was how I always referenced my mom back in the day, as like a pretty drinker. As kind of like a pun. But anyway, so I said to her, I said, I just need to get out of here. And she was like, no. And I was like, yeah, I need to get out of here. Like, I need to go home. Like, I can't be here. And she said, Peter, and she put her hand over mine, and she said, you're really, really sick. And she said, you need to stay. You really need help. And I was like, no, I'm fine. I can go. She's like, you're really sick. Please stay. And, oh, I had gone to, there was a Kroger over there, and I had like 30 or 40 bucks with me, and I knew, because I had 2 Class D felonies that I had plea bargained down, and so I knew I was either going to go to prison for violating, you know, whatever, which my probation officer was so cool with working with me, because my dad had told her what happened, and all this kind of stuff, and, she was like, as long as he stays in treatment and he's successful, then I'm not going to violate his probation. She was like, there's no reason I would rather have him get well. She was awesome. And so, what is this car doing? But I didn't know that at the time. And I was scared to death that I was going to go to either prison. This is my alcoholic mind working the night before, right? That I knew I was either going to go to prison or I was going to treatment. So I was like, I went to the Kroger and I bought like came in with all these packs of cigarettes. I was smoking Camel Whites at the time. Camel Light Whites. And do you remember those? Back in the day, they still make those. Anyway. So she handed me a pack of cigarettes and she said, go down to the coffee lounge, make a cup of coffee, and have a cigarette. And the detox unit was the only unit in the hospital that had real coffee. And so I went down there, and I remember I just sat there, and I was like, I passed a mirror on the way, and I like looked at myself, and I was like, the life of a pretty drinker, you know? Like, I remember thinking that to myself, and, you know, like, you got everything you wanted. And I went down there, and I sat in the lounge, and I was in there, and there was like some woman in there, sitting in there with me, and, that I later kind of became friends with. And I remember like looking out the window, and it was like this massive snowstorm, and I was like, I'm fucked. Like, what happened to me? They detoxed me with phenobarbital. I think that's what it's called. And it's like this, it was like this liquid that they would give you every day. Okay. Withdrawing from alcohol is no joke. I'm telling you right now, it is like no fucking joke. And I remember later reading James Fry, who he got honest with Oprah because she had like marketed the book out and said stuff about it, but like he said later that he fictionalized the whole thing. I remember years later reading James Fry's Million Little Pieces, and in there, like on day 2, he went to the dentist and had like dental work. And I can remember thinking to myself, because he was like in detox for like 10 days, which is a really long detox. First of all, I was in there for like, I think like 7 days, maybe like a day more, day less of a week. And I knew, I was like, there's no way on day 2 I was in any situation to go to an outside dentist and have any kind of dental work done. No way. There's no way. I was shaking like a leaf. I was angry. I was like cussing people out. I mean, I was throwing shit. Like, I threw a chair down the hallway. I mean, it just unbelievable rage. And just, I mean, there is a scene in the movie, When a Man Loves a Woman. If you've never seen it, with Meg Ryan, it is fantastic, and Andy Garcia. And he actually goes to Al-Anon meetings, and it's really cool. It's one of the most accurate movies I've ever seen about treatment and getting sober. So anyway, and what's that guy's name? I loved him. He ended up dying of a heroin overdose. Philip Seymour Hoffman is in it. But anyway, there's a scene in it when she's like in her room and the nurse comes in, or counselor or whatever, and she's like screaming and yelling, and she's like, you don't know what it feels like, you don't know what it feels like. And Like, that scene was me. Like, I cannot even begin to explain to you what the withdrawals from alcohol are like. And so that's why when people like message me and they're like, I want to stop drinking, I think I'm going to stop. I mean, I cannot tell from an email or whatever how much somebody is drinking. So if you're thinking about drinking out there, you need to seek professional help. You need to go talk to somebody, because just trying to stop drinking could throw you into seizures. It is extremely, extremely dangerous. There are people that have tried to quit drinking on their own and they threw themselves into a seizure and died. Like, you need medical assistance for it. And back in the day, 12-step programs, like, detox their own, but they kind of knew how to do it. Like, they would wean them slowly off, but like they would put them in like a room and not let them out and like slowly wean them off, you know, of alcohol. But nobody does that anymore because I'm sure of like liability issues and stuff. But if anybody out there is trying to think of quitting drinking, or your family member is, they need to seek medical help. Like, don't try to do it on your own. So anyway, that was my experience being in detox. I just was fucking angry, and I don't know how they decided that it was time for me to move on, but at some point I moved on to the rehab unit. I know by the time that I went to the rehab unit, I was calm as shit. And like, I kind of stopped fighting. My treatment experience was interesting. I was in treatment, I think I was in treatment for 34 days, 30 some day. I can't remember. I don't know the timing, because like, it was the day before I went back to college. And because I ended up going back to college that first day, and then I was like, okay, I can't take classes this semester. I have to focus on my sobriety. Like, if I don't do this now, like, I'm not going to stop using. Like, I knew that I had no business being in school. I needed to just focus on my recovery. So I don't know how long I was in treatment for. Like, I'm sure I could look it up and find out. I worked at the same treatment program that I went through. And like a couple years before I left, the medical records department said, you've been here so long, you know, do you want to see your medical record? And I was like, no. And they were like, you know, you can see it because we're going to actually like shred it. Like, because they would shred, what do you call them? I think it was like after 10 years, they would shred medical files. And they were like, do you want to see it before we shred it? And I was like, I almost wanted you to see what my counselor had said about me. And then I was like, you know what? I kind of stood there and I flipped through it a little bit. And I saw something that she had written in there. And I was like, and she's a friend of mine today. And I was like, I don't need to see this, you know? And she wouldn't have cared anyway. I mean, she would have told me what she said back then. She was hard as shit on me. But I didn't need to see it, you know what I mean? So I was like, no, I don't want to see it. And I'm not that person today, you know? Like, that's not who I am. And I was feisty and nasty at the beginning of treatment, and I was a different person. I mean, in 30 days, I was a different person. I was like there like 30 or 34 days, but I was completely different. I mean, completely different. And what happened, and this is why I am such a believer in a minimum of a 30-day treatment program. My first week, I detoxed. My second week, I was in rehab, and I was like, I don't need to be here. You people don't know what you're talking about, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I was a spoiled bitch. And then on my third week, I learned to shut my mouth enough and just kind of listen to what people were saying. And when they were talking, I was like, this is so me. Like, this is so me. This was like at the end of the second week, beginning of the third week. I was like, oh my God, they're talking about me. Like, I'm scared. Like, I need help. I need to be here, you know? And then by the fourth week, I was so terrified because I knew that my time was coming up and it was time for me to go home, and I was scared to go home. And I remember talking to my counselor, and she said, you're ready to go. And I said, no, I'm not ready to go. I need to stay here. And, you know, back then we didn't have halfway house programs and independent living programs the way that we do now. There was one in Indianapolis that they had suggested I go live at. I was like, no, I am not going over there. And the only reason I didn't want to go there was because this is so stupid that it was the opposite hospital system that my dad worked for. It was like the only halfway house they could get me into because every other one was full. Now, I mean, halfway houses and independent living environments are like a dime a dozen, but back then that wasn't the case. There was like, I think 2 in Indianapolis, and one was the Salvation Army, which I would have happily gone to, but they were full. And the other one was this hospital, and they don't even have their program anymore. So, but, and I said to her, I said to my counselor, I said, I don't think I'm ready to go home. And she goes, why not? And I said, I'm scared. And she said, okay. And she goes, but you know everything you need to know to stay clean. And I said, yeah. And she goes, you're right where you need to be. She said, you're right there, see? She goes, you need a healthy amount of fear, but you need to be sure that you know the things that you need to do. It's time for you to go out. And so there's a lot of things that happen in between. At this meeting this woman spoke, that I called the pickle lady. She spoke, and that was on New Year's Eve, and it completely resonated with me. And there's so many different things that happened to me while I was there that like were really like profound, life-changing moments. I'll never forget, like on New Year's Eve, I wasn't able to go to the New Year's dance, the recovery dance, because I was such a bitch and asked for my hairstylist to come in and cut my hair. And my counselor said, no, princess, you can stay back. Because see, I was that person, you know, that thought I was unique, that thought I was special and different, and I know that I'm not today. I'm special, but I don't deserve anything different than anybody else. And there's that sense of entitlement that I think a lot of people have, that they don't really understand that none of us are any more entitled than the rest. And I had been reading all of these Michael Crichton books while I was in there, and I was completely resistant to reading the Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous basic text. And so I went up to this guy at the counter. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning. It was like maybe 12:30, I don't know. I'd watched the ball drop. And I saw this guy who I later worked with. And I said, do you guys have anything good to read back there? And I'll never forget, he threw down the basic text of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he said, yeah, why don't you give this a try and read the first 164 pages? I was so pissed. And so I went to the cafeteria, and I made like all these sandwiches. I had this like, you know, loose meat sandwich and chips and stuff, and I had potato salad, and I made me this big plate, and I sat there, and it was snowing like crazy outside, and I had my pack of cigarettes sitting there. And around the cafeteria, they had all these slogans like, you know, one day at a time, and keep it simple, stupid, and all that stuff. And I remember I started reading these 164 pages, which is the basic text. And in the bottom paragraph of page 164, it talks about the road, trudging the road of happy destiny. Ooh, and I remember reading that, and I thought, I just want to be happy. I just want to be happy. I'm not happy. And I read those lines, and they changed my life. I was like, I just want to be happy. I was so tired. I was so sick and tired of being sick and tired, like they say. And I was just tired. I was just so tired. I was so exhausted physically and emotionally and mentally. And I remember reading that line, and I was like, you know, surely some of you will join us along our path. And I was like, this is what I want. And I knew in that moment that there was no turning back. It was like Thelma and Louise, you know, when she says, I don't know what you want to do if you want to go back. She says, but I can't go back. I've come too far, or something like that. And I was like, I've come too far. Like, I can't go back, you know? Like, I can't. And so I just did what I was told to do. I just put one foot in front of the other, you know? But it was terrifying to me. It was absolutely terrifying to me. I didn't know what I was doing. And I remember my counselor said to me before I got out, she said, if you do this, and she later told me, like 10 years later, she said, I never in a million years thought you were going to make it. She goes, you are not the one that I thought was going to make it. We sat in a group one day, and I said to her, I go, what's the success rate supposedly? And there was like 30 of us in this group, and she said, they say 1 in 30 makes it. And I in my head, I was like, I'm going to be that one. I'm going to be that one. And she said to me, I'll never forget, before I got out of treatment, she gave me a hug, and she said, if you do this, this will be the hardest thing you've ever done in your entire life. And she said, but I know that you can do this. And nobody will, you know, be able to take this away from you. And I barely graduated from high school. I wasn't very good at making friends. People bullied me all the time. They didn't like me. This was like something I could do, you know? I could do this for myself. I had no idea it would change my life as drastically as it's changed it. I had no idea, not in a million years, that my life would change the way that it has changed. I just had no idea. I got out of treatment, and my friend picked me up, and I went to school, and this is kind of an interesting story. So like a lot of family members bought me stuff, and my mom, who continued to drink, bought me James Redfield's book, The Celestine Prophecy. I don't know why this book changed me, but so I went to a meeting that day that I got out, and I went and registered for classes, or got my books and all this kind of stuff, and got my hair cut. And I came home, and my friend just kept me completely busy all that day. She was so good. And then I came home, and my dad had the apartment professionally cleaned. He had stocked my refrigerator with like cheese and orange. I mean, like, I had like 10 kinds of juices in there, soda, and I had candy, and because he knew about sugar withdrawals, you know, that sugar is good for going through withdrawals, because a lot of people that, you know, drink a lot go through sugar withdrawals. And he had my coat dry cleaned, and my bed was made, and I had new bedding because I had burned cigarette holes all over my bedding. And I mean, I just came in, and it was so nice, you know, and a new coffee maker and things like that. I put my dad through some real shit, you know, like I put him through some real fucking shit. I can just imagine him, you know, I never even thought about it till right now. I can just imagine him buying this coffee maker, hoping to God, you know, maybe Peter will get in, you know, go to meetings and get excited about coffee. Fucking thing stopped. I want to say this really quick. I just turn it off and turn it back on, but I don't want to forget my thought, and then I'll let it sit. I hope it doesn't cut me off right away. But like, I can just imagine my dad, you know, like shopping and buying this like coffee maker, and like hoping to God that, you know, maybe I'll go to meetings and then come home and like want a cup of coffee like I had at the meeting or something. You know, he bought me all these recovery movies. He bought me like When a Man Loves a Woman and Clean and Sober and all these things, you know, and books, and all these people brought me these books. And my mother had given me James Redfield's Celestine Prophecy, and I told my mom I couldn't see her. That was one of the things I had to do when I was in treatment, was call my mom and tell her that until she stopped drinking, I couldn't be around her. Oh, that was a hard conversation. And she didn't say she quit drinking. She said, okay, I understand. So you're telling me that if we go out to dinner and I want to have a glass of wine with your aunt, like, you don't want to come? And I said, absolutely. And she said, oh, okay. She was pissed. And she got sober 6 months later, and not because of me, but because my uncle had a massive heart attack, and she realized that whether she lived another week or another 10 years, she wanted the condition of her life to change. But like I've said in here a million times, my mom and I, the last, you know, 12 years and 11 months of her life was magical because we spoke the language of recovery. I didn't realize how much I put my dad through back then, though, you know, but I stayed up that whole night, and I read The Celestine. I got back at like my apartment at like 9 or something, and I started reading that book because I didn't really have anything else I wanted to do. And well, first I sat on the edge of my bed, and I put my feet up on my back, or my duffel bag, and I thought to myself, I can call my friend Carissa and we can go run away to California, or I can stay here and just deal with shit and clean up my mess. And I remember what my counselor said about, this will be the hardest thing you ever do, but if you do it, you know, it'll be yours. It'll be life-changing. And I was like, you just got to stay. And I went in and I took a shower, and I used to love to take a shower and drink and hold a bottle in the shower. And I remember I was so weird to be in my shower where I used to drink and not be drinking. And I just started bawling under the shower, and I literally was saying out loud to God, I don't know I had no belief in any kind of higher power at that moment. I had none. I was like, if you are out there, I cannot do this on my own. Please, I need your help if you are out there. And I believe that to this day, whatever is out there, and I do believe that there is something out there, some higher power has never given me more than I can handle in a day, and it's allowed me to continue to persevere and put one foot in front of the other and make it to this point to where I can say, I have a life beyond my wildest dreams. I never thought I would ever be able to say that. And I read that book that night, and I stayed up all night long and I read that book. And I'll never forget, I called my friend the next day, and I said, I can't go to school. She's like, what are you talking about? I said, I can't go to school. Something had changed to me. And this book is all about enlightenment, you know, and it has nothing to do with recovery. And I was like a different person. And I was like, I cannot go to school right now. I've got to focus every bit of my attention on my sobriety. And so I called my dad and I said, I don't want to go to school. I can't go to school right now. And he was like, got real frustrated with me on the phone. And he said, I need you to come into my office and talk to me. So my friend picked me up and she took me to my dad's office. And I sat down there and I explained to him what I had read. And I said, Dad, this is my time. I said, I think that I need to focus on building the foundation for my sobriety. And he said, okay. And he goes, what are you asking for? And I said, I need this was in January. I said, I need 6 months. I cannot go to school right now. I'm willing to get a part-time job. If you want me to get a part-time job, I'll do that. But I cannot go to school right now. I need to just be going to meetings all day long, whatever, you know? And he said, okay, here, you do what you need to do to build your sobriety. I'll pay your rent for the next 6 months. I'll buy your groceries. Other than that, you ain't getting no cash from me. I'll buy you a carton of cigarettes. So he was like, I'll buy you a carton of cigarettes a week, groceries, and I'll pay your rent. Other than that, I'm not giving you any money. And he said, and then at 6 months, you need to either, which ended up becoming 9 months because I just was really super focused. He said, you either need to get a full-time job or be in school full-time. So what happened was that May, 4 months later, I was working full-time. That fall, I went back to school full-time. I was taking 15 credit hours and I was working full-time. So that happened in less than 9 months, which that's crazy when I think back on it, you know? And because, you know, I was known as a kid that just wanted to get out of everything, not have to do anything. I went to 2 to 3 meetings a day, every day. Every day for my first 2 years. It stopped again. Oh, by the way, I'm not starting an ASMR channel. That was a joke. So many people were like, no to the ASMR. I'm not starting an ASMR channel, okay? But anyway, I want to finish this up because I know it's not going to let me record for very long. My first 2 years, I went to between 1 and 3 meetings every day. Now, before I started working, it was definitely 3 meetings a day, every day. Talked to my sponsor all the time. You know, just that was all I did was hang. I didn't talk to any of my old friends, none of them. One of my very good friends called me in treatment on New Year's Eve drunk, and I said, you do realize that I'm in treatment? The next day she called me and she was so upset with herself that her sobriety date is actually January 1st. And so pretty much our first year was spent just she and I going to meetings together. I don't think I'd be here today if it wasn't for her. I don't know, but I went to a lot of meetings by myself too, and that was really good because I met a lot of people, you know, that I still see to this day, you know, 23 and a half years later, I still see them, you know, in meetings and around town, and some of them are, you know, still sober, some of them aren't, and, but I just did what I was told, you know, it wasn't hard. Like, after I got past the initial cravings and all that, like, I just did what I was told. I went to meetings, I worked steps, I got a sponsor, and put one foot in front of the other, and if I was bored and I wanted to go out, I just called somebody to see if they wanted to go get a cheeseburger, you know, or I'd stay in and read, and I read a lot back then, and, you know, I started really appreciating the small things in life. I will say when my mom got sober, that really helped things too, because, you know, my mom and I never once went to a meeting together, not once, because we decided very early on that we wanted to keep our programs completely separate. Because how could I sit in a meeting with my mom and then want to talk about my mom or talk about something that I didn't want my mom to know about? And so we just decided, and vice versa. So we kept our, you know, programs completely separate. But, like, you know, after we would go to meetings at night, we would sometimes meet up at her house or whatever, or condo, and have coffee and talk. And I don't know, it's just, you know, things got easier. My life was boring, definitely. It wasn't exciting. I remember I was at my first New Year's sober. I was with a bunch of guys playing Trivial Pursuit, eating pizza, and drinking 2 liters of soda and 2 liters of Coke. I don't remember. It was just, but I remember sitting there and all that being around. And I remember thinking to myself, if this is as good as it gets, I don't know that I can continue to stay sober. And right after that, like a few months after that was when I met Tanya, and my life changed. You know, I got the greatest friend I've ever had in my entire life. And it's crazy, you know, when I look back on my life and how recovery has been interwoven through everything that has happened to me in 23 and a half years. I mean, it's really everywhere in my life. And I was so resistant, you know, I was so scared, I was so terrified. And it was all about that. It was all about, you know, me being terrified of, I didn't know what my life was going to look like. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know anything about it. And really all I had to do was shut my mouth and listen to what people told me. And they told me how to do it. You just put one foot in front of the other. You do what you're told. You go to meetings. You read your, you know, recovery basic text, whatever that may be, and meditate in the morning and pray and get it down on your knees and say thank you and get it, you know, and at night say help in the morning and thank you at night if you don't have any idea how to pray, and form your own idea of what a, you know, higher power looks like, and get a sponsor and work with your sponsor and call people in recovery when you're thinking about using. And I did all the time, you know. I would sit there and I would think to myself, okay, I'd be craving, and I'd think to myself, if I'll just call people and until, you know, it's 2 o'clock, and then at 2 o'clock I can go use if I want to, if I don't get a hold of anybody. But I would always get a hold of somebody, you know, and they would say, do you need me to come over? Do you need me to get you? You know, do you need me just to talk you through it? Whatever. And people were fantastic, and my life changed. Slowly, my life changed, you know? And like I said with the school and the work thing, I didn't even like seek those out. Those things kind of came back into my life, you know? And because I wanted to do those things. I wanted to live again. I wanted to be part of all of that. And that's kind of my treatment experience. I mean, I have a lot of stories from my first year sober, which are interesting and funny looking back on and stuff like that. But maybe if you guys would like to hear more of those, put them in the comment section below. I don't know how much the addiction and recovery stories are interesting to you guys or boring, and so let me know and put it in the comment section below. And I'm actually going to get off here now because the yellow light is back on again, and tomorrow I'll bring my can in because I'm not going to have this happen again. So I love you guys, and I hope you're having a wonderful beginning to your week, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.